Hotel. The sharp, metallic click of a belt buckle cut through the heavy, suffocating silence of the dimly hotel room. Yoongi rolled his eyes, a bitter scoff escaping his lips as he aggressively adjusted the crooked collar of his shirt. Through the sleek, dark reflection of the mirror, his sharp gaze locked onto Taehyung, who stood a few feet away, entirely unfazed.
You know, Yoongi muttered, his voice dripping with a mix of exhaustion and irritation. For someone who acts completely dead inside, you're annoyingly demanding. Taehyung didn't even blink. He calmly worked his way down his shirt, buttoning his sleeves with an agonizingly slow, calculated precision that made Yoongi's blood simmer. And yet, Taehyung murmured, his deep baritone sending an unwelcome shiver down Yoongi's spine, you keep coming back. Yoongi let out a dry, humorless laugh, tossing his head back slightly as he adjusted his clothes. Don't flatter yourself, Kim. Almost instantly, that suffocating silence filled the room again. But there was no such thing as a comfortable silence between them. It was a suffocating, breathless kind of quiet, the kind that felt like a ticking time bomb. Shadows from the city lights outside stretched across the messy, unmade bed, casting a dim glow over the penthouse. Everything about Kim Taehyung and Min Yoongi was a hazard. A beautiful, catastrophic disaster. Their families absolutely hated each other, bound by decades of bitter rivalry and bad blood. They hated each other just as much. But somehow, through some twisted, magnetic force, they always ended up right here. The same luxurious room. The same suffocating tension. The same beautiful mess they made of each other. Taehyung stepped over to the sleek wooden table, his long fingers wrapping around his expensive watch. He slid it onto his wrist, fastening it without a single hint of rush.
You should leave before someone sees you, Taehyung stated, his voice completely devoid of emotion. Yoongi snatched his coat off the nearby chair, a dangerous, mocking smirk playing on his lips. What? Scared your precious, flawless reputation will get ruined? I don't care about rumors, Taehyung replied smoothly, not even looking up. Then maybe. Yoongi stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low, provocative purr. You're just scared that you actually like me. That did it. Taehyung finally stopped what he was doing and looked at him. His eyes were cold, completely unreadable. A dark, endless abyss that refused to give away a single secret. That expression alone, that stoic, unbothered wall, annoyed Yoongi more than any insult ever could. It drove him insane. You talk too much, Taehyung said flatly, breaking the brief staring contest. And you don't talk enough, Yoongi shot back instantly, crossing his arms.
See?
We balance each other perfectly.
Without a single word or reaction, Taehyung simply walked right past him, his shoulder brushing against Yoongi's in a way that felt entirely intentional. The lack of a reaction only made the fire in Yoongi's chest burn hotter. He hated being ignored, especially by him. Yeah, Yoongi called out lazily, turning on his heel to watch the younger man's retreating back. At least say goodbye after using me. Taehyung's hand froze just inches away from the door handle. The silence stretched between them one last time, thick and heavy. Then, he spoke, his voice dropping to a low whisper that echoed perfectly against the walls of the dark room, entirely refusing to turn around and face him. You were using me too. The words hit Yoongi like a physical blow. It was frustrating. It was maddening. And it was annoyingly true. Yoongi clicked his tongue, a sharp wave of vexation washing over him as he glared at the back of Taehyung's head. Hate you, Yoongi hissed. Taehyung gripped the handle and finally pulled the door open, stepping out into the brightly lit hallway without a single backward glance. Likewise. Hotel lobby. Yoongi shoved his hands deep into his coat pockets as he stepped out of the hotel elevator. On the outside, his face was a mask of pure, unbothered calm, but inside, his mind was a storm of irritation. Kim Taehyung was unbelievable. Cold. Annoying. And somehow, still entirely impossible to stay away from. The sprawling, opulent space of the hotel lobby buzzed quietly with the low hum of expensive conversations and the delicate clinking of crystal glasses. The dark marble floors reflected the warm, golden glow of the massive chandeliers overhead, but Yoongi barely paid attention to any of it as he walked toward the exit, desperate for a breath of fresh air. Until Yoongi froze in his tracks. Great! One of his father's prominent business partners stood just a few feet away, a surprised, overly polite smile plastered across his face. "You're here alone?" Yoongi forced a perfectly practiced, polite expression onto his face immediately. "Unfortunately." The older man laughed loudly, the sound echoing a bit too much in the elegant space. "Your father mentioned you'd start attending more company events soon." Yoongi almost rolled eyes right then and there. Of course he did. His father treated him less like a flesh and blood son, and more like a future business deal to be packaged and sold. "I'll survive somehow," Yoongi replied dryly. The man laughed again, but suddenly, the amusement faded from his eyes. He stepped a fraction closer, lowering his voice into a conspiratorial whisper. "You should be careful around Kim Taehyung." Yoongi's expression didn't even flicker. But beneath the surface, his attention sharpened instantly. "He's dangerous." A ghost of a smirk played at the corner of Yoongi's lips. "I noticed. Your father and Chairman Kim have hated each other for years," the man continued, shaking his head gravely. "If Taehyung gets involved, things could become incredibly ugly." Too late for that, Yoongi thought bitterly. He thanked the man politely, cutting the conversation short before finally making his escape out of the suffocating hotel. Outside of the hotel. The moment he stepped past the glass doors of the building, the biting, cold night air hit his face, shocking his system. He let out a heavy sigh, watching his breath mist in the cold, and pulled a cigarette from his pocket. But before he could even flick his lighter, the purr of an engine cut through the quiet night, and a familiar, sleek black car pulled up, stopping directly in front of him. Yoongi stared at the vehicle for 2 seconds, the lighter still hovering near his face. Then, he let out a sharp laugh of pure disbelief. The heavily tinted window smoothly rolled down. Taehyung sat inside the dark interior, looking just as unbothered and emotionless as he had back in the hotel room. "You forgot your watch," Taehyung said calmly, his voice smooth. Yoongi blinked. He looked down at the expensive, familiar timepiece resting in Taehyung's long fingers. "You seriously chased me down just for this? You were whining about it being a limited edition last week." Yoongi snatched the watch from his hand, his fingers briefly brushing against Taehyung's cold skin. "So you do listen when I talk?" "I listen when you complain." Yoongi smirked despite himself, a reluctant amusement bubbling up in his chest. God, he was annoying. "Thanks," he muttered. Taehyung merely nodded once, his expression unchanging. Almost immediately, the car window started rolling back up, cutting off the connection. Yoongi frowned, stepping closer. "That's it." Taehyung paused the window, looking at him through the small remaining opening with an unreadable gaze. "What else do you want?" Yoongi stared at him for a long, quiet moment before scoffing and shaking his head. "Wow. You really don't know how normal human interactions work, do you?" And then, it happened. For the very first time tonight, Taehyung's stoic mouth twitched slightly at the corner. It was almost a smile. Almost. Before Yoongi could even process it, the window rolled up completely, and the sleek black car pulled away, disappearing smoothly into the dark, wet streets of the night. Yoongi stood there on the pavement, watching the taillights fade into the distance. He looked down at the luxury watch resting in his palm and clicked his tongue. Annoying bastard. But even as the complaint left his lips, he slipped the watch onto his wrist immediately. To be continued. Like, share and subscribe.